Today, I'm going to show you what the new 2023 STAAR Reading Online test with new item types will look like in 6th grade. As you know, the STAAR test is changing. In 2023, all students will take their Reading STAAR test online. Many of the questions and how they are formatted will look different from past tests. To help you become more familiar with the new format, I will be working through one passage from the 6th grade online sampler of the new question types found on TEA website. Angela here from Custom Classroom, helping make test prep simple. To get to the practice test, I have given you the link to the online sampler from the TEA website. Once you get here, you're just going to click sign in. And for this example, I'm going to use 6th grade. And I'm going to go to the 2021 STAAR 6th grade reading new item types. So here we'll see an example of what this new test will look like. I'm going to click select and begin test now. So it starts with this poem, but I'm going to actually skip to the next section that has a paired passage. So here is what the online platform will look like. You should probably take a chance to log in and play around and see what all the features are. But for the purposes of this video, I'm simply going to read through the passages and the questions and their answers and talk about the standard that is being tested, as well as the point value and the correct answer. So you can get a good feel of what the reading level will look like, what the new item types will look like, and get a feel of what your students will be experiencing on the new test come 2023. So here it says, read the next two selections, then choose the best answer to each question. George Washington's portrait. Many artists have hopes that their creation will become well known, but sometimes a work of art achieves greater recognition than the artist might have ever imagined. And in the case of Gilbert Stuart and George Washington, a work of art may not even be completed, but still inspire people long afterward. Stuart was a painter who lived from 1755 to 1828. He was known for both his talent as a painter and his charm as a person. He painted the portraits of approximately 1,000 people during his lifetime. Many distinguished and famous people sat for a portrait with him. But instead of making his subjects sit perfectly still, as we commonly practice at the time, that was commonly practiced at the time, Stuart engaged with them in interesting conversation. He wanted his subjects to feel at ease in order to capture their most natural expression and pose. Only when Stuart painted the person. One of Stuart's aspirations was to paint George Washington. Their meeting was not easy to arrange, but Stuart eventually got the opportunity in 1796. Stuart had a difficult time getting George Washington to be comfortable. The president finally relaxed when Stuart began to talk about horses. This was one of Washington's favorite topics. The men chatted while Stuart painted the then 64-year-old president. Their time together was limited, however. And here's the portrait of Stuart's portrait of George Washington. The result was a portrait of just Washington's head and shoulders. The reason why Stuart never finished the rest of the portrait are uncertain. What is known is that the bottom and left parts of the canvas remain bare, and Stuart persuaded Washington to let him keep the original. Stuart made and sold multiple copies of the portrait in his lifetime, a common practice in the days before cameras. Even unfinished, Stuart's original portrait is considered the definitive representation of George Washington. People have always believed that the portrait truly captures the great man's presence. The image was used on the dollar bill beginning in 1869 and has been featured there ever since. This means just about everyone in the United States has seen this work of art. While it is an amazing portrait, surely even Stuart would be amazed by his lasting popularity. So the second passage is the story behind the Silmarillion. J.R.R. Tolkien, is known for the world of fantasy he created in the novel The Hobbit and the trilogy The Lord of the Rings. Yet, for Tolkien, one important work remained unfinished at his death in 1873. This book was The Silmarillion. Tolkien's novels were based on a fictional world. In that world, creatures such as elves and dwarves coexist with original human beings. The Silmarillion can be thought of as a prequel to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It is an account of the history of this fantasy world before The Hobbit takes place. This history tells about when the villain of that world battled heroines to claim possession of the jewels called the Silmarillion. But the story of how the Silmarillion was created may be just as interesting as the story told on its pages. It was Tolkien's first and last work. He began working on it in 1917 and continued adding to it and revising it for about 56 years. Tolkien was unable to complete the work before he died, so his son Christopher took on the challenge of finishing it. Tolkien had amassed many writings he wished to include in the book. Christopher thought, however, that presenting all the material would lead only to confusion for the readers, so he decided to select and arrange the pieces that together would create the most complete and understandable history of this fantasy world. To accomplish this task, Christopher enlisted the aid of a friend. Guy Garville Kay had always been interested in writing, particularly fantasy. He worked on the Silmarillion with Christopher for approximately a year. This assignment changed Kay's life, and he eventually became a best-selling fantasy writer himself. Kay's work on the Silmarillion undoubtedly provided training and valuable experience on his journey to becoming an author. The published version of the Silmarillion has 5 parts, which was what Tolkien wanted, but the parts had not been put together as a whole when Christopher took on the work after his father died. Some stories required organizing, and some parts were still incomplete and needed finishing. The Silmarillion was published in 1977 to mixed reviews. Some people believed it was too different from what they had come to expect from Tolkien's writing. It had a grim mood and a complicated plot. Others were impressed with the masterful editing Tolkien's son had done. They knew that Christopher had started the task that many incomplete pieces. After the Silmarillion, Christopher published more of his father's unfinished writings, including a children's story and a poem about King Arthur. Their publication allowed still more of J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasies to be shared with devout readers around the world. So here there are these 2 passages, and so I'm going to go through the 5 questions that have been paired with them. The first question is a multi-select question. It says, use the story behind the Silmarillion to answer the following question. Based on the information in paragraphs 5 and 6 of the story behind the Silmarillion, what can the reader infer about J.R.R. Tolkien's son, Christopher? Select 2 correct answers. So this is why this is multi-select, is there's more than one correct answer. So here it says Christopher had previous experience with fiction writing. And this is not correct. Christopher respected his father's wishes regarding the writings. That is correct. Christopher was unaffected by the criticism he received. That is also correct. Christopher published some of his father's unfinished writings to make money. That is incorrect. And Christopher blamed his friends for the mixed review of his final writings, and that's also incorrect. So here, these 2 answers are correct. So this question is worth 2 points. And this is an inference question because you have to infer these and they're not directly stated in the text. Now let's move on to question 6. Question 6 is a text entry where you just have to answer like a single word or a few words. Use George Washington's portrait to answer the following question. Read the sentence from paragraph 2 of George Washington's portrait. But instead of making his subject sit perfectly still, as was commonly practiced at the time, Stuart engaged them in interesting conversation. Enter your answer in the box. In this sentence, the word blank provides a clue to the meaning of engage. And in this case, there are 2 possible answers. They could talk about conversation. So that could be one answer that could be pasted in. Or they could, so conversation is one, and also interesting. So students could enter either of those and be correct. And this question is worth 1 point. And here, this is a context clue question where they're having to find the word that helps them understand engage. So I'm going to just type in interesting. Okay, now let's go to number 7. Number 7 is a multi-part question. So there's going to be a part A, part B. Use George Washington's portrait to answer the following question. This question has 2 parts. Part A, which statement best expresses the key idea of paragraph 2 in the article George Washington's Portrait? So here it says Stuart wanted to paint more well-known figures than any other artist. That is not correct. Stuart ignored rules that portrait painters followed in his days. That's not exactly correct either. Stuart helped his subjects relax in order to achieve a realistic likeness. And that is true because it's all about him getting them to relax. And Stuart gained success because of the number of paintings he produced. And that's not correct, as we're thinking about kind of this is really the main idea or key idea. All right, so now that we've answered part A, and we know it's about helping the subjects relax, we're going to look at part B. Which detail from the paragraph best supports the answer in part A? So these are going to come directly from the passage. Stuart encouraged lively discussion with his clients. Well, yes, that did help them relax. Sitters for other artists were usually asked to stay very still. That doesn't help. Stuart's paintings painted about 1,000 people throughout his career. That also doesn't help. And sitters for Stuart's paintings were famous and important people. So that's not correct. So here again, this is going to be worth 2 points. And this is a main idea or key idea question. All right, question number 8. Here is going to be an example of a short constructed response. So use George Washington's portrait to answer the following questions. Read the question carefully, then enter your answer in the box provided. In paragraph 3 of George Washington's portrait, why does the author include the detail of Gilbert Stuart talking to George Washington about horses? Support your answer with evidence from the article. So here's an example response that TEA gave, so you can kind of see what they might be looking for here. The answer includes this detail as an example of how Stuart would put his subjects at ease. George Washington loved talking about horses, so when Stuart talked with him about horses, George Washington became more relaxed and Stuart was able to paint a realistic portrait of him. So that's just an example of what might be a good response to this question. This question is a author's purpose question. So why this detail was included, and this constructed response is worth 2 points. All right, question 9. Read the articles George Washington's Portrait and the story behind the Silmarillion based on the information in both articles. Write a response to the following. So here we're the first time actually using both passages, and this is to do a composition or an extended constructed response. So this is the new way that writing is being added into these reading or reading language arts tests. So I'm going to read over the question so you can get an idea of it. So through the Silmarillion and the painting of George Washington were left incomplete by their creators. Both are widely known today. Explain how the painting and the novel are different in their journey from unfinished project to popular and important works. Write a well-organized informational essay that uses specific evidence from the article to support your answer. Remember to clearly state your controlling idea, organize your writing, develop your ideas in detail, use evidence from both selections in your response, use correct spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and grammar. Manage your time carefully so that you can review the selections, plan your writing, write your response, revise and edit your response. Write your response in the box provided. So here they're going to have to formulate a long essay. And as an example of what's kind of being looked for, A correct response could involve a student providing an extended response explanation that Tolkien died and never completed the Silmarillion. Stuart finished the most important part of his painting and made copies and sold it because it was a good representation of Washington. The Silmarillion was prepared for publishing by Tolkien's son and his friend, while Stuart's painting became famous just for the portion that was completed. The students would need to provide thorough evidence from the passage to support this controlling idea. And this type of question is worth 5 points. And so they would have to be able to plan and write and put everything into this box for this passage. So here you can see what one of the passages might look like on the 6th grade new exam. If you are looking to help your students prepare for the new item types, check out my new STAAR warm-up. The link can be found in the description. I hope you found this video helpful. Check out the playlist to learn more about other grade levels.